Hello friends and subscribers. Let's do some critical thought today. First, let's hear this euphoria.
50 years ago today, the dream of a man on the moon came true.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
That moment still resonates. 650 million people worldwide watched those first grainy images.
My parents were so excited, they were almost crying.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
It's amazing. They went up, landed, turned around, and came back.
50 years ago, my dad took the three of us kids all out and bought us a newspaper. This one's mine, and I still look at it from time to time and dream.
Gary George was a dreamer too, who went from building backyard rockets with friends to an internship with NASA's
so they
engineer
laughed,
team.
they cried, and they dreamed, but did they engage in any logical thought?
For $218, he bought a bunch of surplus government videotapes and made a discovery of his own, original recordings from the moon.
Put out to the side, cut a little bit.
I got to these 3 reels of tape that were labeled Apollo 11 EVA.
So this brilliant NASA intern ends up with a bunch of Apollo EVA videos, 3 of them to be exact, that are labeled, in fact, Apollo EVA, and disposed of at surplus auction for $218. This guy says he doesn't discover him until his dad finds him later and looks at the label that says Apollo EVA tape. So we're supposed to believe that by accident NASA threw out the tapes that were supposedly recording the greatest moment of human achievement in history of the 20th century.
And Dad, being the space buff that he was, he looked at that and he just said, I don't think I'd give those away. I think I'd hang on to those. Those might be valuable someday.
That someday is today. The tapes are being auctioned at Sotheby's, billed as the only surviving first-generation recording of the moonwalk. This is the footage on those tapes. Sotheby's says it's cleaner than what has been seen before because it was recorded on the feed straight from the moon. All other recordings are of a lesser quality, fed out by NASA at the time.
Okay, time for more critical thought. This has been covered by Bart Sabrell, David Percy, multiple people in the latest examinations of the moon tapes. The grainy footage given to the networks by NASA at the time of these moon events were designed in advance to be hard to see. The networks even complained about it, saying, why do we have this crummy stuff when you have the originals available? And they gave some excuse about it. But here we are having the real tapes actually in existence and then thrown away. Where is the critical thought? And when you get into journalism, where is NBC News on this, saying, well, why was this lost? Why aren't we questioning why the government would even release such important moon tapes? And finally, if you go into the next level, Orion, the program that was supposed to take us back to the moon, talks about why we can't return to the moon, and Don Bennett says we lost the data.
Moonwalk is the only moment that I can think of in human history where the whole world was united for a good reason.
Here at Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry, they take visitors back to the excitement of the Apollo missions.
It was just a very inspirational and historic moment.
People have been coming together to relive that giant leap ever since. And now it will remain preserved on video.
So-called kangaroo hop.
I'm just kind of glad that I could have, a role in saving them.
Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Chicago.
We have this George guy, this goofball, intern at NASA, had these tapes apparently buried for decades, or he's on another type of a job for NASA now as part of this complete 50th anniversary hoax, completing this lost story going back about 10 to 15 years of when these tapes, all this data, 1,100 reels disappeared. And this guy suddenly reappears, says, I have them, I'm going to sell them on Sotheby's. Well, regardless of whether he's a nice guy or not, let's just analyze it a little bit deeper. This guy, again, is supposedly loyal to NASA, but yet never told them for this long, since his father discovered him, and, you know, never offered him back to NASA. Instead, chooses to hold on to him until exactly on the 50th anniversary, in conjunction with Sotheby's, to auction them and get $1.8 million for them. By the way, that's taxpayers' money that's been lost. If they were going to be sold, they should have been sold by the government for the rightful amount that they're worth. And if they were worth at $1.8 million based on these people that believe in this moon fantasy, then it should have been sold for that. But going back to what they're saying at the end of this little clip from NBC News again, these people are living in a dream world and they love this fantasy of the moon. They can't ever critically consider about why these events are even not repeated for 50 years. Not only that, about why this footage would have been lost for so long. And this video is not about the entire way that the moon hoax was completed. I think there's a lot of research that many of you have already done on this. The point is, what kind of spell are people under that they can't connect the dots that this is arranged, or at least, at a minimum, a fraud on the taxpayer, when some guy out of the blue can say he got these on army or military surplus sale for $218, held on to them for decades, and then resells them for $1.8 million. Yet we're supposed to pretend like he won the lottery, like this wasn't government property, taxpayers' property, and that he's entitled to do that, or at the minimum, that he doesn't have any association with the government to complete such a sale. I'm at a loss to understand why people who are supposedly walking around reading and thinking cannot question this story at all and say, hey, why is the government even unloading this in the beginning? Why didn't they keep the best evidence of the landing when it had clear footage, when the networks got the grainiest footage and couldn't even get this footage? And now it's suddenly released and back in the hands of someone from Sotheby's auction house that purchased it, instead of in some historical museum, and the government's out $1.8 million minus $218 for their losses of what the actual market value of this was, even if they did go to the moon. Where is the critical thought? And when you get into journalism, where is NBC News on this, saying, well, why was this lost? Why aren't we questioning why the government would even release such important moon tapes? And finally, if you go into the next level, Orion, the program that was supposed to take us back to the moon, talks about why we can't return to the moon, and Don Bennett says we lost the data. Orion, other footage says that we can't go through the Van Allen belts. Yet we have all this data, these 1,100 tapes that were just disposed of. It's a ridiculous story, even for the person who's the least bit discerning about why any of this would occur in a rational world. Let's get back down to the earth. And you know what earth I'm talking about. Get out of this dream world where we believe these fantasies, these 50-year-old stories of a trance that people were put in from the television set. and critically think. I'd ask my listeners to just ask questions to your friends. Why would this occur? Have you ever pulled down a photo from NASA and analyzed it? Why is the light on the wrong side of a shady lunar lander? Why doesn't anybody ever even consider the odds against going back and forth to the moon 6 times, 12 times in each, in both directions, and yet never had a problem, despite people going to Mount Everest or Antarctica or the North Pole and having tremendous difficulty doing that. Yet this mission was completed without major failure, repeatedly, without the computing power of even 1/1,000,000th of your Apple iPhone. It's just a story that's in people's minds that they can't give up. It's the attachment to it, combined with the science fiction aspects that were mentioned by William Shatner about the combination of science fiction and science fact, resulting in this hybrid of some kind of a space fantasy of space travel. The lying to the kids about this mission, and see all these kids trying to learn about and get excited about something that never happened, to involve them in a deception that they can go to the Mars so-called planet and be saved from this world. The whole thing is disgusting. I just hope that as listeners that you continue to spread the truth. Thanks for listening, and let's keep up the exposure of these frauds. Thank you very much. Good night. God bless you.
And now it will remain preserved on video.
I'm just kind of glad that I could have, a role in saving them.
Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Chicago.